Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI. Each week we introduce you to something new, something that'll make you think, something that might change your life. Here's this week's author interview on the Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI.
Joining us this week for the Wednesday Bookmark is PeggySue Wells. Peggy is the best-selling author or co-author of nearly 30 books. She's also a speaker, a radio talk show host. Peggy lives and writes in Indiana. We're going to talk this morning about her book, co-authored with Pam Farrell, The 10 Best Decisions a Single Mom Can Make, a biblical guide for navigating family life on your own. Thanks so much for your time this morning, PeggySue.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this great program. I love your interviews.
You begin this book by telling the story of how you became a single mom. Would you be willing to share that story with us before we dive into the rest of the book?
Yeah, and probably like most single moms, that was never the plan. The whole idea is to get married and live happily ever after. And I particularly wanted to do that because my parents were divorced, and so I knew what that was like growing up with parents that weren't together. And I really wanted to do it differently, and it didn't work out that way. And when my youngest of my 7 children was a year old, their dad chose to leave, and so he went out and started a life elsewhere. And so then I became exactly what I hadn't wanted to be, which is a single mom. And the thing that was really fascinating about how that then became this book 20 years later was a lot of people would say, hey, you've got all this information about doing the single mom thing. And I'm like, but I don't want to be known as the single mom. And it was like, but you have 20 years of experience. So for somebody new coming into this, you can like be that voice of, oh, okay, here's some good steps to help you be successful. So I did go ahead and step up and write the book, even though I hadn't wanted to. And in the process of writing the book, I found out 2 very important things. One is that single, as in single mom, is a relationship status, and that changes. It can go, into different seasons. And that being a mom, that is a sacred relationship that moms have with our children that we will always have.
The second of your 10 best decisions list is decide to be decisive. How can single moms work toward feeling more confident in their decision-making skills?
I think this is probably the biggest hiccup that comes along for single moms. And the reason is we're kind of in this trauma situation. We're in a place where we didn't want to be. And there's a lot of times there's, some crisis that's come along with it. Sometimes there's some betrayal that comes with it. And so what happens is the front part of our brain turns off. And instead, that part of our brain that comes alive during trauma as a protection, which tells us to either fight, flight, or freeze, that goes into action really big. And so the thing that gets tough for single moms is that when we need to make really good decisions, the most is when we're really having a hard time doing exactly that. And so what we wanted to do in the book was say, these are some ways to get your thinking part of your brain back online and to take it in steps. One of the first things that we say to do is choose the next right thing. So when you're faced with a decision, to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life or how you're going to do your finances or how you're going to do your insurances or how you're going to do your career is like way too big. So it's like in that moment, choose the next right thing, and pretty soon that thinking part of our brain comes back into play. The other thing is find some good people that you can trust, that can be a community, that can be like a board of advisors, so that I can sometimes go to those people and say, I just can't think right now. I need a voice that other than my own in my head. And so we help guide moms to find that because there are people out there that truly do want to help.
The third best decision is decide to be a proactive parent. How does that distinguish from the decision to be decisive itself? Like, in what ways are you suggesting single moms be proactive?
Yeah, a person who parents is doing the most right thing possible, whether we are single or otherwise. And being proactive is understanding what are the 3 most important things, because we have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of energy, and so much on our plate. And so we kind of like brought it down to what are the 3 most important. And the first thing is that our children know who God is, that I make that introduction, like I make my introduction for my children to other important people in their lives, how much more important for them to know God, because that's about eternity. So that when I have my limited amount of time, that I'm going to spend time reading the Bible aloud and praying with my children. And then the second decision that I'm going to do is, what are life skills? Because we have to know how to function as a human being. So how can I help my children know how to function in life, that they can make their own meals, they can do their laundry, they know how to look up a number, they know how to find information, they know how to have conversations with people. So life skills was my next priority. And then the third one was those academics. We need to know how to read, write, and do arithmetic, because that is what enables us, that when God calls us into our calling, that we are ready and equipped to go forward.
You tell a kind of wild but true tale at the beginning of chapter 7 about the time you moved across the country, only to kind of move back, sort of, 4 years later. Give us the gist of what happened there and how that personal experience ties into your larger point about living in community.
Oh, my goodness. You know, if you're going to do things wrong, I tell everybody I'm going to find the 3 ways to do it wrong. So do get from my experience, because I think it was Jim Rohn who said it's always good to learn from your own mistakes, but it's even better to learn from someone else's. So definitely pick up the book and learn from my mistakes so you don't have to repeat them. But when the divorce was final, I wanted to get as far away from where I had been as I could. And so I did. I sold my dream home, and I moved the children that were still at home across the nation. And we were there for 4 years, and then just kind of realized, you know, this area back here is home. And with my 7, they had scattered, gone to college, different careers that they had pursued. But then everybody came back to Indiana and came back to this area. And I remember talking to my son as he was moving back to this area, and I'm down across the nation, and I said, what is it about this? Why is everybody coming back to there? And he said, Mom, this is home. And I was like, you know, you're right. And by then we had some grandbabies that were coming, and so I moved back. And what I realized in that time was 2 things. And one is what I tell everyone. When you get that divorce, when, you know, that there's that split, when there's that giant change in your life, please wait a year before you make a large decision. And I did exactly the opposite. The divorce was final. I had the house sold, and I was gone the following month. And it was like way too soon. It was a reaction rather than a response, and it was done not from thinking part. I also learned that you can't go away from a situation or from a problem. There were things that I needed to deal with, and running away to the other side of the nation didn't make it work. In fact, I needed to actually face those things. So it's not a matter of I'm going to get away from it. It was that I had to go internally, and I had to do some work with the Lord, and I had to face the things that I needed to face in myself and then be able to work through them. So I called the people that had bought my home, and I said, can I buy my house back? And they said, no, which I don't blame them. Like I said, it is my dream home. So I was like, okay, God, next, now what? And the house next door to where I used to live came up for sale. And so I called my realtor and I said, hey, my second favorite house is up for sale. And I said, unless there's something wrong with that, that's where my neighbors live. They know that house. And so I said, this will be your easiest sale ever. So sure enough, we came, walked through the house. It was the house I remember, and we bought it. And so now my kids and grandkids play on the back side of the woods that my kids played in when they were growing up.
I love how you put it in the book. I might be the only person who lives next door to my dream home that I sold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
pretty wild experience. So much more in the book. You talk about dating and how to do that wisely and just a lot of other things. We're going to have to kind of bring this in for a landing here. But what do you want to say, Peggy, to the single moms listening as we close?
The couple of things that I want you to know right off is that this is not the ideal. And I understand that this isn't the ideal, but God works in the real. And for us that aren't living in the ideal situation, we are living in a real situation, and God is there in the middle of that. And this isn't too hard for him at all. And on top of that, he's not surprised. He is not suddenly shocked that, oh my goodness, you're a single-parent home and your kids are growing up with a single mom. That doesn't surprise him at all. He knew what was going to happen, and he also knows how to use that in the best way for the mom and for the children. And so one of the biggest things that I would say is there's a chapter in the book about staying out of the 5 R's, and probably one of the biggest things that I learned was that there's something that'll come up and I'll feel rejected, and then I don't like feeling rejected, so then I feel resentful, and then after resentment leads into resistance, and then into revenge, and then because we're in a family, we do repeat. And so this is how these relationships get damaged. And so it's like, you know what, from the very beginning, and I had to do this with God, I had to realize that he wasn't doing something that was rejecting me, even though I felt rejected when my life didn't go the way I thought it should. And so I learned to not make up a story in my head about what went on, but instead to say, this is where I am now. Okay, God, what are you teaching me about you in this moment? Because he will always be doing things for me, not to me.
So much solid advice. PeggySue Wells, co-authored with Pam Farrell, The 10 Best Decisions a Single Mom Can Make, a biblical guide for navigating family life on your own. Our focus this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. PeggySue, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Brock.
The Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI. To find out more about this week's bookmark, or hear the author interview again, or to discover previous books highlighted on the Wednesday Bookmark, visit bookmark.chri.ca.